Hey guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to DIY build a slab of concrete and the formwork involved and all the details you need, and including why you need to do all those steps. All the other videos gloss over those details, and this one I'm going to show you everything I know to do the job right in all your DIY builds, so stay tuned. First things first, you got to make the form. The formwork basically holds your concrete, okay? And underneath that form, your base is very important. So first, you have to tamp your base using one of those. That's a tamper, 10 by 10, especially if you disturb the ground. If you don't, I still advise to tamp the ground. Then you're going to lay a 4-inch, at minimum 4-inch base of 3/4 inch crushed gravel. I'm just showing that there. That's your base. You put your form on the base. Okay, the reason we have a base, guys, is number one, for strength. Gravel doesn't compress like sand. But one thing a lot of people gloss over, the crushed gravel allows drainage of water. You do not want water in the winter with the freeze thaw. It will basically crack your concrete. So all that water under your slab is getting drained through your gravel. That's why you want your formwork on gravel. Next is your formwork. Your formwork holds the concrete, as the name implies. It forms the concrete. In this case, I'm showing you with a 2x4, but if the design calls for something thicker, go with that. Disclaimer, I am not designing your formwork. I'm not designing your supports. If somebody wants to comment how to do those things, please do so below. But I'm just giving you the general guidelines and the whys, why you should be doing certain things. Once you take that, you can design to your application. So in this case, I'm showing you a 2x4 formed with screws in the corner, okay? You can use nails. They have better shear resistance. But in this case, I know I've used 2x4s, never had a problem. So I've never also seen anything poured less than 4 inches thick. That's the minimum I've seen. I don't think you can get away with anything less. So typically that's done with a 2x4, and as it's leveled against the grade, it comes to about 4 inches thick. Next, you want to level your form. You're going to screed the concrete to the top of the form. So if your form isn't level, your slab isn't level. Having said that, if you want to design in a slope, make sure your formwork has a slope for drainage. In garages, I've seen as low as 0.5%. More typical is maybe 1%. Depends on your application. So whatever your formwork is going to follow in terms of level is how you're going to pour your concrete. Next, you'll notice here I have some dirt. Typically want the concrete a bit above the grade, okay? And it also helps contain the concrete at the bottom. As you level this, you're going to notice maybe a gap on one edge. So the dirt is going to be packed tightly against your formwork, okay? And make sure your slab is somewhat higher than your grade. That is the typical way to do that. Maybe an inch, maybe 1/2 inch. You don't want water ponding on your slab. If you plan to use rebar, make sure you both have the proper rebar coverage, and you want to put your rebar in the tension zone. What that means is below your neutral axis. What's your neutral axis? It's typically in something with a uniform shape below the center line. So in this case, this is roughly a 4-inch slab. I would put it below 2 inches. The rule of thumb is 1/3 from the bottom. Okay, so take your 4 inches times by 1/3. That's where I'd put the rebar, from the bottom. In this case, I'm not showing it, but you get the idea. Your rebar design is dictated by your engineer, what your load is, and make sure it's sitting on supports. Don't make it sit on dirt. You want the proper supports because it's going to move on you. And of course, tie your rebar wire. Okay, can you get away without rebar? Yeah, possibly. Again, consult your engineer. But remember, concrete is weak in tension. You want your rebar in your tension zone below your neutral axis. That's what's going to give it the strength. Once you have your formwork build, you need to support your formwork. So what I use is 2x2s. I cut a pointed end at the bottom and I drive them down, as you see with this one, with the biggest hammer I have. I think this is a 4-pound sledge, as deep as you can go into the grade. Once I have my stake as low as I can get it, as deep as I can get into the grade, I'm going to drive a screw in into the stake, into the formwork. That is this piece right here. Okay? Then I'm going to cut a kicker at an angle like this. Okay? And then drive another stake like this. This is extra support, especially if you're using something very thick. 2x4 you might get away with just this stake, but I like adding the kicker and the other support. How often to space these? Again, that comes to the design, how thick of the slab you're building, etc., etc. You can also use the stakes to level your form. You can drive them in around, pull this up or down to level it, and then drive a screw into the stake into your formwork. Okay, it's the day of your concrete pour. First, you're going to want to make sure your formwork is wet. Okay, you can even use a bit of cooking oil on the formwork. Why? So your forms will be removed easier after. Next, you're going to want to wet and pack the dirt around the formwork too, to make sure it contains the concrete. And another thing too, the reason why we wet the substrate, the formwork, is you don't want the formwork, the substrate, the base sucking moisture out of your concrete. You're going to get uneven curing. That's a big no-no. When you're pouring your concrete, you're going to want to screed it with a sawing action from front to back. I like using a 2x4, okay, like I'm showing here with the level. That'll make it nice and smooth on the top. If you want to trowel it, you can go for the trowel finish. Be careful not to overwork the concrete. You can remove the air entrapment if your concrete does have that. And make sure, guys, make sure you water cure. So the next day, immerse the slab with water and do that for at least 3 days. I aim for 7 minimum, ideally 28 days. Concrete cures much stronger if it's exposed to moisture. So what you want to do is you got to wet it in the morning, put something over it. If it's too big, don't worry about it. Ideally put a piece of plastic to hold the moisture. If not, just wet it in the morning, wet in the evening. Do that every day, even if you have a barrier. Okay guys, thanks for watching. Remember, empower yourself, you can do it. And please drop any comments, any calculations, rules of thumb you guys use for how often you place these stakes, how often you put the kickers, my comments about rebar, where to place it, what kind of base to use, how thick do you put for that gravel. Do you put 4 inches? Do you put more? Depends where you live, I guess. Are you in the frost zone? Are you not? How do you build your formwork? Do you guys use screws? Do you use nails? I like screws. I can remove them easier. I never had one shear, but hey, I know a lot of guys in the construction industry use nails. There's advantages and disadvantages. Thanks for watching. Take care.